travel isn't just about destinations, it's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Hlelo Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
702.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Welcome to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of just some of the most important insights, the best interviews, the best comments, really, of the show this week. It would be great if you would share this with some people in your circles. You might well have a member of your family, maybe a friend who you think might need to hear one of our conversations. Just go to your podcast app and search for The Money Show. It would be great if you would do that for us. Thank you. To start, some of the big news stories from this week, and our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, in a way, a move I think that might shake the coalition a little bit, removing the Deputy Trade, Industry and Competition Minister, Andrew Whitfield. He, of course, belongs to the DA. The DA is furious about this. We'll hear, and I think there'll be developments over the next couple of days about what will happen next, but also completely unexpected, because we don't really at this stage, it seems, know the true reason for why this decision has been made. The Time Group co-founder and CEO, Connie Matlejoane, he slammed a decision by the Home Affairs Department to increase identity verification fees by 6,500%. He says the move is a threat to financial inclusion and digital transformation. The Home Affairs Minister, Leon Schreiber, hitting back at him very hard, completely saying that Jonker had misunderstood what was going on, hadn't understood the consultation. And interestingly, Capitec, a big rival of Time, they supported the Home Affairs Department. And then the NATO Secretary General, he's a former Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, he likened the US President Donald Trump to a daddy intervening in a schoolyard fight after the US leader repeatedly berated Israel and Iran, including using some language that we haven't really heard from a US president in public. Tonight, we bring you a mixture of stories from the world of money from the week that has been. In our conversation about how I make my money, Professor Glenda Gray spoke about her incredible career path, her groundbreaking work in HIV research, and her dedication to improving public health and the health of children.
My father worked on the mines at ERPM. I was born in Boksburg. And I grew up, first of all, in Boksburg, and then we moved to a place called Mapleton, which is just outside Nigel. And then we moved to a place called Scarpins Rest, which is just between Springs and Brakpan. And I used to catch a train from Scarpins Rest station to Boksburg East to go to my primary school, Martin School, in the morning. So my parents we would catch the train at 6:30 in the morning and get to Boksburg East at 7:00. And then walk to school so we could save our money for ice cream.
Sure, okay. From what I've read, you were pretty keen to be a doctor pretty early. Now, there were not a lot of female doctors around at the time. What was it about being a doctor that was so important to you? It clearly mattered. I mean, it clearly matters to you still. But what was happening around you at the time that made you think, with such a strong belief as a young person, that you wanted to be a doctor?
It's hard to really understand that belief, but as young as 4, my parents told me that I told them that I wanted to be a doctor. I think it happened around the time, at that stage, when we were living on a small holding in Mapleton. A cow was giving birth, and it was a breech delivery, and they had to use a rope to pull the calf out. And the vet looked at me and said, "Oh, one day you're going to be a vet." So I said, "No, I'm going to be a doctor and look after human beings." So I guess that was the time I articulated, and it was around this breech delivery of this calf.
Was there something about the power of helping an animal then, but helping a human being? The really, I mean, a breech delivery can be very, very dangerous, and yet, the animals would both have walked away. I mean, the calf for the first time, walked away healthy. I mean, there's a real power in watching something like that take place, maybe.
it is a huge power, and I think that just being committed to, I loved animals growing up, and as I went to school, I did well at school, and in those days in Boksburg, if you did well at school and you were a girl, you'd become a teacher because you could get a bursary, and no one, and you didn't have to worry about paying for your education. And when I told my school, Boksburg High, that I wanted to be a doctor, they kind of smiled endearingly at me. And I guess, I was determined, and I applied to Wits University. And at that stage, Wits was doing an experiment. They had decided to diversify who they brought into medical school. So there were a lot more women in my year. They're much more racially diverse, and a lot more people that came from middle class and working class backgrounds, not from private schools. So when I got into Wits Medical School, I was part of a very diverse group, but I also struggled because I didn't have a good education. In my latter years at school, we were short of maths and physics teachers, and I struggled. So like a lot of people coming into university from education that is not as good as private schools, it takes a while to catch up. So for the first year or two at medical school, I really felt stupid. And then suddenly in my clinical years, I caught up to my peers and was able to compete and do as well as people who'd come from better schools in Johannesburg.
It's so interesting that, I mean, so often it's really about getting through the first year or two of university, and then you start to see people really grasping whatever it is, and off they go, and that clearly happened to you. I do want to skip forward a little bit because I do want to get to some of the other things that you've been involved in, but at one point you clearly realized that HIV was going to be very, very important in South Africa. And when HIV first came on the scene, sort of mid-1980s, I don't think many people realized how important it was going to be. Was there a moment when you realized what the AIDS pandemic and how many South Africans it was going to take, how vulnerable we were going to be, how big this thing is?
I think there were three things that pointed me to wanting to do something in HIV. So the first thing was I was a student activist during apartheid, and the organization I worked for, which was Health Workers Association, used to organize communities around health issues. And with HIV emerging, I worked in that sector, trying to mobilize communities around HIV and work with them. And then I went and worked at Baragwanath Hospital, and I worked in the main ICU. And the cardiothoracic surgeon who was in charge of ICU was this brilliant surgeon. And I could never understand why he wasn't working in the theaters. And he was one of the first people in South Africa who got HIV, and he died in 1988. And he was my father worked on the mines at ERPM. I was born in Boksburg, and I grew up, first of all, in Boksburg, and then we moved to a place called Mapleton, which is just outside Nigel. And then we moved to a place called Scarpins Rest, which is just between Springs and Brakpan. And I used to catch a train from Scarpins Rest Station to Boksburg East to go to my primary school, Martin School, in the morning. So my parents we would catch the train at 6:30 in the morning and get to Boksburg East at 7, and then walk to school so we could save our money for ice cream.
Sure, okay. From what I've read, you were pretty keen to be a doctor pretty early. Now, there were not a lot of female doctors around at the time. What was it about being a doctor that was so important to you? It clearly mattered. I mean, it clearly matters to you still. But what was happening around you at the time that made you think, with such a strong belief as a young person, that you wanted to be a doctor?
It's hard to really understand that belief, but as young as 4, my parents told me that I told them that I wanted to be a doctor. I think it happened around the time, at that stage, when we were living on a small holding in Mapleton. A cow was giving birth, and it was a breech delivery, and they had to use a rope to pull the calf out. And the vet looked at me and said, "Oh, one day you're going to be a vet." So I said, "No, I'm going to be a doctor and look after human beings." So I guess that was the the time I articulated, and it was around this breech delivery of this calf.
Was there something about the power of helping an animal then, but helping a human being? The really, I mean, a breech delivery can be very, very dangerous, and yet, you know, the animals would both have walked away. I mean, the calf for the first time walked away healthy. I mean, there's a real power in watching something like that take place. Maybe
it is a huge power, and I think that just being committed to, I loved animals growing up, and as I went to school, I did well at school. And in those days in Boksburg, if you did well at school and you were a girl, you'd become a teacher because you could get a bursary and you didn't have to worry about paying for your education. And when I told my school, Boksburg High, that I wanted to be a doctor, they kind of smiled endearingly at me. And I guess, I was determined, and I applied to Wits University. And at that stage, Wits was doing an experiment. They had decided to diversify who they brought into medical school. So there were a lot more women in my year. They're much more racially diverse, and a lot more people that came from middle class and working class backgrounds, not from private schools. So when I got into Wits Medical School, I was part of a very diverse group, but I also struggled because I didn't have a good education. In my latter years at school, we were short of maths and physics teachers, and I struggled. So like a lot of people coming into university from education that is not as good as private schools, it takes a while to catch up. So for the first year or two at medical school, I really felt stupid. And then suddenly in my clinical years, I caught up to my peers and was able to compete and do as well as people who'd come from better schools in Johannesburg.
It's so interesting that, I mean, so often it's really about getting through the first year or two of university, and then you start to see people really grasping whatever it is, and off they go, and that clearly happened to you. I do want to skip forward a little bit because I do want to get to some of the other things that you've been involved in, but at one point you clearly realized that HIV was going to be very, very important in South Africa. And when HIV first came on the scene, sort of mid-1980s, I don't think many people realized how important it was going to be. Was there a moment when you realized what the AIDS pandemic and how many South Africans it was going to take, how vulnerable we were going to be, how big this thing is?
I think there were three things that pointed me to wanting to do something in HIV. So the first thing was I was a student activist during apartheid, and the organization I worked for, which was Health Workers Association, used to organize communities around health issues. And with HIV emerging, I worked in that sector, trying to mobilize communities around HIV and work with them. And then I went and worked at Baragwanath Hospital, and I worked in the main ICU. And the cardiothoracic surgeon who was in charge of ICU was this brilliant surgeon. And I could never understand why he wasn't working in the theaters. And he was one of the first people in South Africa who got HIV, and he died in 1988. And he was my father worked on the mines at ERPM. I was born in Boksburg, and I grew up first of all in Boksburg, and then we moved to a place called Mapleton, which is just outside Nigel. And then we moved to a place called Scarpensrus.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Hlelo, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
702.
The best of the Money Show from this week.
This week, personal finance, Warren Ingram, the financial advisor and co-founder of Galileo Capital, breaking down the Rand's impact on your finances. Also talking about why the Rand-dollar exchange rate has a real impact on your financial health.
I mean, understanding that it affects almost every aspect of our lives where something has a price. Stephen, if you're buying food, you would think that the dollar has no impact, but a lot of our food items are dollar related. When they quote the price of maize, it's not quoted, unfortunately, in global terms in rands, it's quoted in dollars. And if you go through something like fuel, oil in particular, you'll notice that it's always, dollars per barrel. And the price of fuel, again, has an enormous impact on our economy. It affects the cost of transport, which means that it affects every single item that gets delivered to a shop. And then, we have to get to the shop and so on and so on. So the moment you look at the rand and you look at how it's moving against the dollar, if life is volatile, which it seems to me every single day of our lives at the moment, and especially the currency, it means that our cost of living is hugely impacted by the rand dollar. And cost of living, the only thing that the Reserve Bank can do to control the cost of living is use interest rates. So if we're dealing with rising cost of living because of imported inflation from the weak rand versus the strong dollar, then we're in a position where the Reserve Bank has to respond to that. And so they push up interest rates, which makes our mortgages more expensive, our credit cards. It makes it difficult for government to have enough money to buy and pay for infrastructure because it's got to service debt. And so you can see very quickly how you can get into a real downward spiral with a very strong dollar and a very weak rand. And equally, that if that cycle turns, how it can become something of a virtuous circle.
Okay, and then, what pushes the value of the rand up and what pushes it down? And you're not allowed to say because there are more buyers than sellers.
I always think, famously, we one of our not current cabinet ministers said, it doesn't matter, we'll just move the rand in our own direction or something like that. We'll just pick up the rand.
We'll pick the rand. We'll pick up the rand. Nomvula Mokanyane, it was you.
Nomvula Mokanyane, I wish we could do that. I wish there was someone in our government that was that powerful that could just pick up the rand. So I think to understand one huge advantage we have is we are one of the most traded, the jargon is liquid. So one of the most liquid currencies in the world, after things like the dollar and the euro, etc. One of the emerging market currencies that's most easy for global investors to buy and sell is the rand. And the reason for that is we've got a very deep capital market. So we've got very strong banks, we've got a very good exchange, and very well managed, well regulated financial system. And so foreigners will buy and sell our rands with ease, and that makes us very susceptible to global tides, let's say. And so there is almost nothing that the government can do to pick up the rand or to make it fall if they really wanted to do that as well. We find ourselves at the mercy of a lot of global sentiment. So, for example, if the world is in a reasonably positive mood, which it seems to be in the last sort of almost want to say 24 hours, we watch the rand go from 18 to the dollar to 17.70, and we have nothing to do with that. It's not like we suddenly became a slightly better country or our economy grew a little bit faster or something like that. That's entirely global factors. It's geopolitics at play, and our rand moves. And the only impact that a South African institution can have on the rand would be the Reserve Bank. And what they can do is they can keep interest rates high, which is currently what they're doing. And the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to make the rand an attractive place for foreign investors to store money. Because if they can store money here and earn 8 or 9% a year, it's much better than what they can do if they can store money in let's say, the US at 3% a year. So we don't want to be in a position where suddenly, you can get 3% on rands or 3% on dollars, because guess what? People are going to move their money out of rands and into dollars. So the Reserve Bank's the only institution that can influence the rand. And I would say it's a small impact. Global dynamics move the rand. a lot more than anything else. The only time we unfortunately can really affect the rand would be by dragging it down. And you'll remember the weekend special, and I'm not talking about Apalele Fassi, the famous South African fullback. I'm talking about the other one, the Minister of Finance, who was there for a few days. His appointment, and I think I was almost live on the show when that happened, had a catastrophic effect on markets and most especially the rand. And equally, when he was then booted out of the job, so the rand recovered. So a major political misstep can cause the rand to lose a lot of value. But unfortunately, the other way around won't see the rand, for example, going from 18 to 14 to the dollar if we do something amazing in politics. I think it's kind of a one-way street. We might creep up over time and the rand might get stronger gradually if our economy grows and our politicians manage to behave and play nicely in the government of national unity, but go the other way and we can collapse the rand very quickly.
Is there any benefit to having the rand traded in this way? I mean, it goes up and down all the time. It can be incredibly frustrating. But I suppose the benefit would be that because we're an open economy, goods flow in and out of it very easily, and that's generally a good thing. It might help to, it means that food prices might be a bit lower, for example.
I think it creates the opportunity for good news to happen. And so just to understand where we are right now, we're in an environment where interest rates are high. And we certainly looking at an inflation rate that's declining. And so if interest rates start to come down, that means that things like our mortgages will get cheaper. And it means that companies have a little bit more cash flow to invest in growing themselves. And buying more stock. The government has a little bit more breathing room because interest rates are lower. They have a little bit more cash to pay down some more debt or do some more infrastructure spending. And so when you've got a very liquid, very open market, if you actually do things well and you take the right steps and the right actions, then this liquid market becomes an incredible strength. And investors feel great comfort in allocating money here because they can see things are going well, and they also have the comfort that they can pull their money out if things aren't going well. So I think that it's an enormous strength, Stephen. I think it's just unfortunately that because it's liquid, it's also a very, very quick and almost immediate price on what the market thinks of what's going on in the country at a moment in time. So when we're behaving badly or not doing the right thing or not getting the reforms, then we see a weak currency, and when our economy is not growing, we see it there as well. So I think unfortunately we've just seen what the world thinks of our policies and maybe our lack of execution of those policies, and that's why we're in the situation we are in now. But it's not a one-way bet. It takes good action. And we could see the exact opposite, and then we would all be thrilled with what's going on, I guess, except for the mining houses who sell their commodities in dollars, and they would love the rand to be weak for a long period of time.
I mean, the other examples, of course, Liz Truss as the British Prime Minister, the reaction to the British pound on Brexit, all sorts of other examples. Okay, how does the rand then influence our money? We're dealing in rands. The rand goes up and down. Obviously, it affects what we can buy and how much things cost.
So let's start with the one that I think is almost core to the whole country, and that will be the fuel price. A country like ours, and I mean we don't have a lot of fuel in the ground, that we can pull out and convert, let's say, gas to fuel. So it means we basically buy every single barrel of oil that we convert to fuel and consume in our country, and because that's dollar denominated. If the rand is sitting at 19 to the dollar, it means that our fuel is more expensive, and that's inflationary. Equally, when the rand starts to go through a period of strength, and potentially now, for example, where we see the dollar price coming down again, then you might get a time where you've got a strong rand and a low dollar price of oil, which means that we're in a deflationary environment, which would be a huge relief to us. That means our fuel prices get cheaper. If that happens, it means inflation goes down. And if that's falling inflation means food's getting cheaper. The goods we buy are getting cheaper. And that means the Reserve Bank looks at this whole situation and goes, well, hang on, we don't need this massive sledgehammer of interest rates to deal with inflation right now, we can kind of lighten the load on the whole economy because inflation's under control, and that might just be the spark that causes a further economic growth and some sort of acceleration from 0.5 or 1% a year, whatever it is at the moment, to 2 or 3 or 4%. So the rand and most especially the oil price are big factors in the way that our money will move. And just to understand that, once we get that sort of kick on of positive sentiment, we look at things like the bond market. And if the bond market, the prices of bonds are move in the opposite direction to interest rates. So if interest rates are falling, it means the price of bonds is rising. That's very good for most of the big retirement funds, pension funds, etc., lots of retirees. And so if interest rates are going down, it also means that stock markets might do well because high interest rates are a drag on share prices. It means that companies don't have capital to reinvest, etc. I mean, understanding that it affects almost every aspect of our lives where something has a price, Stephen.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Hlelo Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
702.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Our shapeshifter this week, Connie Matlejoane, the CEO of CRM Enterprise and founder of the Hlelo Foundation, sharing her story. Astonishing to go from someone who was about to be retrenched to starting her own business and the impact that she's managed to have on her own career and other people.
I'm very solutions driven. So when I had rumors through the grapevine that there might be retrenchment coming, I made it easy for my boss. I went to talk to him to say, I know this thing is coming, so I don't want to put you in a difficult position. I will volunteer to be one of the people that leave, provided that if I start my own thing, you're going to support me. And my boss was like, 100%, I'm going to support you. And that's what they did. So I took the retrenchment package and I started CRM Enterprise with my desk from my previous work, my laptop from my previous work, and my cell phone from my previous work. And I started in a little corner of my bedroom there, and that's how CRM Enterprise was launched.
How did you decide what to go into?
I'm a marketing professional, so I've been doing marketing for over. At the time, I was in marketing for over 15 years, and I always enjoyed seeing brands come to life. And I like what branding does. Seeing something that is plain, creating something beautiful with it. It was a no-brainer that was the industry that I was going to go into. And because I was working mostly in the gaming industry, I knew how important promotional products are. And I knew that there was a market for it, and I understood the industry. So it was easy for me to go into that space.
Corporate gifts is interesting. I mean, I've watched people have conversations. What should we give the guests at our conference this year? And there have been certain phases. There was a time, a long time ago, where every corporate gift was a flash drive. Okay, I mean, it feels like ages ago. Then a few years ago, there was a time when it would be wireless headphones, the cheap wireless earphones. And I think the thing about that is you keep them because you lose your Apple ones, and so you end up using them, right? I think they're quite effective. How are there certain things that just work when it comes to corporate gifting? You have to know what you're actually giving people, and it has to be something they actually want or that their children want.
Corporate gifts have evolved over time. It's no longer like little cheap things that you just give away for the sake of giving away. They've become more practical. So you get even the clothing that you get these days, you can hardly tell that is a promotional jacket that you're wearing, because it has gone into that space. You now have different types of water bottles They used to call them squeeze bottles because it was the plasticky ones. Now you get your vacuum bottles that will keep your drinks hot for long, cold for long. So the space has shifted now. The corporate gifts has also gone into environmentally friendly products. So you have a wide variety of choice that you can choose from. So whether you are environmentally conscious, you are more of a high-end kind of a client that want high-end gifts, you are able to get those. So I think it has evolved quite a bit. Even the branding itself. I mean, it used to just be your heat press, your embroidery. Now you have things like laser engraving on a clothing.
Yeah.
Now you have things like the rubber kind of branding that you can do. So it has evolved quite a bit.
Your first client, where did they come from? Was it someone you knew already?
My former boss.
Played a big role here, it would seem.
So the very first money that came into CRM account, actually it came from my church, Care Bible Church, where I fellowship. They were the very first client because my pastor was like, no, we're going to be the first one to do this. So the very first mugs that I branded, they were for Care Bible Church. And then, of course, my boss followed through on his promise that they were going to buy corporate gifts from me. It was the first big order that I got, and it was exciting. So from there on, it was not as easy as I thought it would be, because you think you know people, a lot of people, and it will be easy because I know Stephen. Stephen is definitely going to buy. But then Stephen has a boss. And the boss and the boss. So the decision is not as easy as saying, I know Connie, let's support her. So I had to prove myself in the industry. I had to do the small jobs. I had to be very aggressive with showcasing every little thing that I do on our social media platforms to attract clients. And the brand grew.
One of the things that's really changed with starting a business, and maybe especially one like this, is social media. And we spoke to someone a little while ago, Lisa Raleigh, who started a gym chain in Durban 30 years ago. And the way she did it is, she said she literally had to print pamphlets and put them under people's windscreens, right, to do home gym visits, okay? For you, by the time you were starting, it was 2018, 2019, wasn't it?
2018.
Yeah, before the pandemic, we have to say that.
Just before the COVID, yes.
Yes. And you could use social media, and did that make it a lot cheaper to start?
It did. It made it a lot cheaper to start. And also there is Gaming for Africa magazine. Gaming for Africa magazine caters for the gaming industry because that's who I am. So I had a slot in there. So every Thursday, they will showcase some of my products and that will be circulated to their database. I think that also helped a lot to create a brand awareness, but also posting relentlessly on social media. However little thing I do, whether it's one mug with a picture on it, I'll post it. If I print a flyer, I'll post it. Everything was on social media. And because I didn't have to pay much except for the data, it was a no-brainer that that's the platform to use.
Connie, you at some point had to start employing people, right? And I always think that's such a big responsibility. You're kind of responsible for this person, for their children. Who was the first person you employed? Are they still with you, or have they left?
No, they left. The first employee that I employed, his name was Justin. But then I employed him just before COVID hit. And then COVID hit, then I could not keep him because of the COVID.
But employing people, how have you found that experience? Because you're suddenly responsible for them. You have to deal with them. You have to pay them. They also have to do things for you. You have to manage them.
It's a difficult one, especially because I'm passionate about the youth. So my employees are young people, and young people are energetic, and sometimes they can be too energetic. So it can become tricky at times. But if you have all your processes in place, I mean, I have all the contracts in place, I have all the procedures in place, everyone has their staff handbook, everyone has their uniform, everyone knows what leaves to take, when to take it, everyone knows when to claim for overtime, when not to claim for overtime. So because everything is in place in terms of HR processes, it's quite easy. Even the payroll, I do it myself because I use a system. So it's easy to manage that. And also I do performance reviews regularly. I also do one-on-ones. We have our weekly meetings every Monday with the team. Every year we go away for our strategy session to plan for the next year so that everyone knows what's expected and what to do. So it's quite interesting. It's quite easy. You just need to have your processes in place.
You also try and help young entrepreneurs through your foundation. Do you find that young people who you're working with want to be entrepreneurs because they want to be entrepreneurs? Or do they want to be entrepreneurs because there's no other way to get a job, to get an income?
Most of them because there's no other way to earn an income. Interesting enough, some of them, it's because they think it's a ticket to be rich.
Yeah.
And then they find out very quickly that actually it's not. So there is a different caliber of young people that we work with. And that's why I take time to get to know them, talk to them. When we're planning our youth summit that we just held now on the 16th, I made sure to be the one to do the RSVPs, to talk to these people, just to get into their head, to find out exactly who they are and why are they wanting to be at the summit. And that informs whatever program that we put together to help these young entrepreneurs.
Connie Matlejoane there, highlighting her leadership approach and what she's been able to do to try and create work for others and for herself and to empower entrepreneurs.
You know what they say, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. But one of the joys of travel is getting to experience other people's grass and how it grows. Sometimes it just makes us appreciate our own lawn back at home so much more. Sometimes it inspires us to redesign our garden. But either way, I think the very act of traveling changes us every time. So if you've got a case of the wanderlust and you want to get some inspiration for your next trip, join me for Wander the World, a collection of some of my favorite travel conversations. Whether we're scuba diving in Papua New Guinea, motorbiking through Armenia, or taking a short left to find the biggest pumpkin in the Overberg, join us as we explore destinations near and far with the help of fellow travelers and adventurers. You'll find the podcast on Prime Media Plus or your nearest podcatcher.
$7.02.
You are listening to The Money Show's best bits.
Investment School this week, François Smith, Client Portfolio Analyst at Stonehague Fleming Investment Management, and Hlelo Giyose, Chief Investment Officer and Principal at First Avenue Investment Management, looking at the evolving dynamics, the changing dynamics of the old active versus passive investing debate, and also looking at hybrid strategies that focus on cheaper investments and adaptability in response to how markets are moving.
So passive investing in its most traditional form is when a particular passive provider attempts to mimic traditionally a cap-weighted index by simply buying and holding all of its constituents. Whereas an active manager, on the other hand, they go and attempt to identify good securities beforehand, and then they collate a portfolio with the promise of potentially outperforming the market in which they're investing.
So you could either buy the JSE All Share, that would be passive, or you could buy Capitec, that would be active.
Well, essentially, yes, yeah.
Okay. Hlelo, I mean, this argument, this debate has been around for a long time. Is it possible to know who's better? And a lot of people point to passive investors as having a better track record over time.
Well, if we could just be a little bit more nuanced about active versus
We
passive.
don't like nuance.
Right? The minute you walk away, the minute you step away, even by an ounce from mimicking the index as it is, the minute you step away and say, I'm going to replicate the index on an equal weighted basis, or I'm going to mimic it on any other basis, you are active. Right? The minute you do that, and you because you will receive an outcome that is different from that of the benchmark. And the rationale would be, I'm doing this because I believe I can outperform the index, okay, by making this one nuanced change, okay? So now here comes the argument is that the vast majority of active managers, if you look at it over a long period of time, underperform the index. I think there's a statistic that says only 10% or 15 up to 15% of managers outperform the index over, say, a 5-year period plus, right? And so whether or not it's cheap or expensive, or what, the point is the prospect of not beating the market is lower the minute you walk away from the index. So better stay with the index. You pay less. Maybe you don't get some of those spectacular returns like Warren Buffett. But what are the chances? Because you stand the chance of missing the, you can't pick the guy who beats the market. It's difficult. It's like a lottery.
François, you've recently put together an article about this, and you talk about costs.
Yes.
And you suggest that costs are actually king, and it is cheaper to invest passively than actively. Why are costs so important if there is a possibility of outperforming the market?
Well, investing is inherently an uncertain endeavor, and costs are a part of it that is certain. So if you are a client looking to collate a portfolio, it is something to be very conscious of. It is one of the deterministic components that can actually be controlled. So it is truly important.
You suggest that in fact cheaper funds tend to outperform more expensive ones. That makes no sense to me, I have to tell you. Why is that?
Well, it all comes down to being able to pass through the performance and expertise of the manager, whether it's an active manager, a semi-active manager, or someone exactly as you've just pointed out, someone who inherently departs even slightly from the cap-weighted index. It comes down to being able to pass that outperformance onto the customer. And that is really where the value lies. That is the promise, being able to get that excess performance into your investors' hands.
Hlelo, I'm interested in that. If cheaper funds were always, if the cheaper ways to invest always outperformed the more expensive ones, how do the expensive ones even survive?
Yeah, because when the expensive ones, well, let's put it this way. When a manager can outperform the benchmark, right, the index or the market, it's worth it. It's worth $1 billion. So a good example is you pay a premium for the opportunity that maybe the guy you've chosen is Warren Buffett. Okay, that's worth a lot. Maybe the guy you've chosen is Phil Fisher. Maybe the guy you've chosen is one of the greats, right? And there are all these people around the world. Now, they're not as many as there are funds, but you pay a premium for that prospect because when you do get it right, the outcome is completely outstanding by a country mile. It outperforms the market by an order of magnitude you would never have imagined. But you pay for that right up front. You pay for that chance.
There's so few of these people, it seems, around the world. So presumably they make quite a lot of money when they do it, obviously.
Of course they do.
But at the same time, it just raises the level of risk to get involved in this. And over time, technological change might well have an impact on, who is able to actually actively manage a market in that way.
No. I think you misunderstand, Stephen. It's no different from record companies. Record companies, how many artists out there have record deals? And how many artists out there ever become top-selling artists? 1% of artists actually occupy most of the playtime in a radio station. But radio stations pay the artists to take that chance that they'll get the next Michael Jackson, the next Beyonce. Why is it any different for asset management?
Makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. François, are active and passive, and I sort of started off by saying that there might be a little bit of a breakdown in the definition, that it's a bit more nuanced than it used to be or different. How has it changed?
Well, it's exactly as he's alluded to before.
Saying, yeah.
As soon as you depart from the traditional cap-weighted indexing strategy, you are inherently making an active decision. And what's really interesting is that your passive providers are more and more giving exposure to very niche and unique corners of the market, different weighting methodologies, different styles, different strategies, and that in itself is an active decision. So what essentially is happening, that even if you are picking a passive product, you are making an active decision to have an exposure to a part of the market that you potentially believe is going to do better than the overall market.
Okay, so are we seeing the sort of old-fashioned sort of differences between the two breaking down a little bit? I mean, is there a different way? Are we looking at the market in a way that's slightly different from where we were 10, 15 years ago?
I think when one considers the active versus passive debate, people view it in a dichotomous lens, and I think that is both limiting and contentious. Because I believe that having passive exposure gives you low-cost, cheap market participation, and you also, and by incorporating active bets in your portfolio, you are allowing for the prospect of potential outperformance of that market. Getting it right is exceptionally difficult, but being nihilistic and not allowing for the possibility, I think, is limiting yourself and your portfolio.
Hlelo, I mean, the idea that people are active, does that mean that they're actually as active as they sound? I mean, when you talk about an active asset manager, I have a sense of them doing something every day. Presumably they're not, changing what I've invested with them every day. I mean, I presume they're not as active as all that. They're taking in a lot of information every day, probably.
Yeah, and there are grades of being active. There, at the extreme, we have what they call day traders, who never go to bed without closing a position, right? And then there are the extreme, like such as Warren Buffett, who can hold a position since 1950, as he did in Geico, 1950 till today.
Sure.
Right? So these are two extremes. But I have to tell you that I think when you are an investor, you want to put your money into the stock market, you really should consider yourself as someone who's buying a hybrid car, part electric battery and part petrol, right? The electric battery is a passive part. It's cheap. The petrol is an active part. You have to pay the oil price as it goes up and down, right? You blend the two to get, on average, a lower price or a lower cost of energy than had you just gone fully active, right? Both have a role. There's some markets, I think, if you want to buy cash, why get an active manager just to invest in cash? That you can do passive. Some people feel that way about bonds. That you can do passive. Now, with equity, where you stand the chance of getting exceptional outcomes, where you also have to pay sometimes an exceptional amount of money to participate in that, that's your petrol, right? That's where you get more octane.
That's such a useful way to explain it.
Yeah.
So then, okay, we see that traditional categories are blurring, François. I mean, presumably this is going to continue. I mean, that blurring is, the whole way in which we look at this is going to continue to change.
Yeah, I think so. I think the market will never reach a point where there's complete polarity towards the one side or the other, because active managers have to do research and they have to get into parts of the market that is unique, and in doing so they keep the market relatively efficient. Passive providers rely on that to provide low-cost markets that are relatively efficient. And as soon as the markets are perceived to be inefficient, active managers will jump in and they'll try to exploit those opportunities. So saying that, well, passive is the only solution forever and ever, amen, I don't think that is the way.
That's François Smith and Hlelo Giyose giving you some expert insights into the evolving and changing landscapes of active and passive investing and looking at hybrid strategies. Those are some of the best bits of the Money Show this week, just a digest of some of the most important insights. If you'd like to hear more, you can go to our website, or please go to your favorite podcast app and search for The Money Show. Have a good weekend. Stay warm. We'll be back with you on The Money Show, 6 o'clock on Monday.